Hi, my name's Lauren.
I'm Dave.
And I'm James.
Together today, we're going to be talking to you about a number of new features on Google Play that can help you monitor and improve the quality of your app or game. We're also going to share developer success stories that bring to life how you might use these features, as well as the business impact of investing in quality. Whether you're business-focused or technical, you'll find something in this talk for you. To kick off, I want to talk about the why there is a business case for quality on Play. Play gives you access to billions of people across many countries and regions, many languages, and on many different device models. But your true measure of opportunity on Google Play depends on what I like to call your high-quality reach, the number of users who can not only install and use your app or game, but who also have a good experience when they do so. When you have high-quality reach, your engineering efforts, marketing budgets, and growth strategy can be lined up to reinforce each other. In other words, you acquire users for whom your app works well. And because it works well for these users, your engagement and retention strategies will be more effective, and you will have a higher return on investment. What happens when you have low-quality reach? This means your app is available to and being installed by users who experience poor stability and performance when they use it. It's much harder for you to engage and retain users if you can't give them a good experience. So if you've invested resources in acquiring these users, you're likely to see a poor return on that investment. But there's another consequence. Your app's discoverability and conversion on the Play Store can be affected by both its Android Vitals metrics and its ratings. So, if you have a lot of users with low quality reach, this could hurt your ability to acquire new users, even if they would have had a good experience. This is why reach and quality are so foundational to your success on Play. Success requires you not only to maximize your high quality reach, but also to minimize your low quality reach. Okay, so quality matters, and you'll see some case studies later in this talk that show it can matter a lot. This is why Play offers tools across the development lifecycle to help you monitor and improve your quality. You can broadly categorize these as follows. Monitor. This is about understanding your current quality. Prioritize. This is about evaluating your current quality and deciding where to make investments. Act. This is about understanding what it will take to optimize or fix the problem and doing so. Of course, any framework is a simplification versus reality, and this one is no exception. Sometimes a fix might be so trivial that you just do it, even though it's not the most impactful thing you could do. On the other hand, sometimes even monitoring requires some level of investment. Some metrics are only available through an SDK. In that situation, prioritization is necessary in order to start monitoring, as well as to take action after you've done so. Also, managing quality isn't just a reactive process. Planning and testing will help you minimize the chances of quality issues in the first place. And if you have a choice between preventing a quality issue or fixing it, it's generally in your interest to prevent it, given that low quality reach can hurt your app's discoverability. Not only that, but your users have memories and opinions that they will share with others, which may cast a shadow well after your metrics have recovered. So, when you plan to act, aim to prevent first. We've launched a number of new features that will make it easier for you to monitor, prioritize, and act on your quality. I'm going to hand over to Dave to talk about these, starting with monitoring, which is where you'd start if you had an app or game that was already launched.
Thanks, Lauren. Android Vitals is your destination in Play to monitor and improve the technical quality of your app or game as it's being used by real users. It's one of our most established products used by nearly 70% of our top 1,000 developers. Android Vitals reports on several key aspects of technical quality. The top two aspects are stability and performance. Stability measures how often your app crashes or freezes. Performance comes in several flavors. One aspect of performance is startup time. Vitals defines startup time as time to initial display, which is how long it takes from when a user taps your app icon to the first frames, usually a splash screen, being shown on the screen. Another aspect is rendering, which is measured as the fraction of frames that are slow or frozen. This is measured only for frames rendered using the Android built-in UI framework, not OpenGL or Vulkan. This means rendering doesn't cover gameplay. You can also find other metrics like battery and permission usage if you want to go further. Vitals also allows you to configure email alerts for anomalies in any of your Vitals metrics. These are sudden, impactful changes in quality metrics. The unique thing about Android Vitals is that it's your definitive source for understanding how Google Play evaluates your app quality. So, to maximize your success on Play, it's critical that you keep an eye on your Vitals metrics, even if you also have other ways of monitoring your technical quality. For games, we also offer a tool called Android Performance Tuner, which we refer to as APT. APT is powered by the Android Game SDK, and the data shows up in the console. We launched it to give you performance metrics for gameplay because of the limitations in Vitals metrics that I mentioned earlier. APT currently supports both frame rate and loading time metrics, along with game, device, and network context to help you narrow down the root cause of issues. Because it's an SDK, it requires some upfront investment. This can range from a couple of hours if you're using a compatible game engine, to maybe a couple of days if you need to do a custom integration. But the benefits could more than justify this. To illustrate, we recently published a case study from Spoko, the developer of The Witcher. They used Android Performance Tuner to assess their game's performance on different devices with real testers during soft launch. Based on this data, they refined their device targeting to launch with confidence on a wider variety of devices, which resulted in both more device reach and 10% more downloads. This is a great example of how an investment in monitoring performance can more than pay off. And you can read more about how they did this in the case study on our APT site. Let's talk about some other new features in Vitals to help you with monitoring. One of our top feature requests is the ability to explore Vitals metrics at country level. If your app or game is available in multiple locations and you have different strategies or game experiences by market, then understanding metrics at country level is important, both for troubleshooting and prioritization. We're delighted to announce that country data is now available in Vitals, both as a breakdown for each individual metric and also as a filter. Another request we've often heard from developers is the desire to use Android Vitals outside Play Console. In fact, this is probably the #1 developer request we've received in recent years. We've listened to this feedback, and I'm very pleased to tell you that we have just launched a new developer reporting API. This gives you programmatic access to all 4 core Vitals metrics and issues data, including crash and ANR rates, counts, clusters, and stack traces. It also gives you 3 years of history. If you want to automate your quality workflows, work with Vitals data alongside other datasets, or build your own dashboards, the reporting API is how you can do it. To get started, check out the documentation at the link on the screen, which covers how to get access, a list of the data available through the API today, and code samples. We know some of you have been waiting a long time for this, and we appreciate your patience. As you can see, we are listening, so please keep the feedback coming. Another thing that we've heard you ask is to make it easier to use Vitals with other crash reporting tools, specifically Crashlytics from Firebase. I'm pleased to tell you that we are working closely with Crashlytics to make both products work better together. Starting today, you'll be able to link your Play app and your Crashlytics app to see Play track information in Crashlytics. If you use Crashlytics, go to the Crashlytics dashboard to link your app and give it a try. You can learn more about this in the Crashlytics talk, which you can find below. You'll be seeing more from this collaboration as well. We are making some changes so that issue clusters will, very soon, have the same name in both Vitals and Crashlytics, making it easier for you to use the two products together. And in the coming months, we'll start surfacing key Vitals information in the Crashlytics dashboard, which will happen automatically if you've linked accounts. Like the API, this is designed to give you easier access to Vitals data in the places it's most useful to you. Now I'll hand back to Lauren to talk about how you prioritize information from Vitals and APT.
Thanks, Dave. It's one thing to monitor your quality. It's another thing to be able to evaluate it. If you have 15% slow frames, is that good or bad? How would you decide? What if you have a very high crash rate on a specific device model? Should you fix it? Maybe you don't have many users on that device. But what if the users that you do have are your most valuable? I'm going to walk through a few ways to tackle this. The very first thing to look at is the bad behavior threshold. Many Vitals metrics have a threshold at which you start to see warnings. Pay attention to these. If your app or game is the wrong side of one of these thresholds, it could affect your discoverability. Another important reference point is peer benchmarks. Peer benchmarks allow you to compare yourself with other apps in the same category as you. They use the same categorization as the Play Store, so your peer set contains apps that would be showing up alongside yours in certain user searches. Peer sets exclude the lowest performing apps and abandoned apps to ensure that they are a useful aspirational bar for you. Another reference point you can use is, of course, yourself. Not only other apps you may have, but the one you're currently monitoring. Compare it to previous releases, or just look at the trends over time. Finally, we recently launched a new tool called Reach and Devices, which is specifically designed to help in this prioritization phase. Reach and Devices helps you build business cases for decisions like what device specs to build for and target, which geographies to launch in or expand to, and what to test and optimize for. It does this by enabling you to understand your user and issue distributions on key dimensions like Android version, RAM, screen metrics, and chipsets. You can drill down on these distributions to country level. Break out your data for different device types like mobile, tablet, and Wear. And you can see peer distributions alongside your own app for context. You can even use Reach and Devices to make decisions before you have a published title, just by looking at the peer data on its own. Let me walk through an example of how you might use it to build a business case for improving quality in an app that's already live. Suppose I have a social app in Brazil. It has a very high ANR rate in Android Vitals, and I'm trying to decide how much effort to put into improving it. In Reach and Devices, I can select ANR rate as a metric. I can actually select 2 metrics at a time, but I'll come back to the second metric later. My app is a social app, so I'll pick social as the peer group category, and it's only available in Brazil, so I filter by country to limit my peer set data to Brazil as well. In the overview page, I now see the distribution of ANR rates for both my app and its peers in Brazil across different dimensions. Let's look at ANR rate by RAM, so I'm going to click on Explore. I'm now in the Details page. Here I see the same bar chart as the overview, but this time with 3 bars in each set. The dark blue bar is my app's ANR rate, and the orange bar in the middle is the median ANR rate for my peers. So for example, according to this chart, my highest ANR rate by RAM is on 1.5 to 2 gig devices, at around 5%. This is well above the bad behavior threshold, and quite a bit higher than my peers. The third, lighter blue bar in each set is only visible in this drill down. What it tells me is the absolute count of ANRs in each RAM bucket, and it's connected to the right-hand axis. So, for 1.5 to 2 gig RAM devices, it looks like I have around 2,000 ANRs in total. And this number takes into account the number of sessions I have on that RAM, as well as my 5% ANR rate. In other words, this number is essentially telling me the impact of ANRs in each RAM bucket on my overall ANR rate. And here, the light blue bar on 1.5 to 2 gigs is highest, meaning it's the biggest driver of my overall ANR rate. So there's a number of things that suggest this ANR rate is concerning from a technical perspective. I'm above the bad behavior threshold, I'm worse than my peers, and it's the biggest driver of my app's ANR rate. What about the business perspective? Let's look at a second metric to answer this. I already picked ANR rate for optimization. I'll pick install base as well to build the business case. Here's where you start to see the power of reach in devices. This chart is showing the same RAM categories as on the ANR chart, but for install base instead. It's for the same countries and peers and the same time period. So now I can see that my install base on 1.5 to 2 gigs RAM is higher than on any other RAM bucket at around 30%. It's also quite a bit higher than my peers, which is actually surprising given my quality is worse. But then again, I'm underrepresented on 3 to 4 gigs. So maybe this tells me more about how I'm doing on higher RAM devices than on low RAM devices. I might want to look at those separately. For now, let's keep looking at 1.5 to 2 gigs. So I've got 30% of my users in this bucket, and I already know that this has very poor stability. This could affect my discoverability and have direct ratings impacts, and in fact I can check my ratings breakdown to see that. So there's a risk of churn if I do nothing, and there may be even more upside if I could actually improve the user experience. At this point, I can make an installs-based business case to invest in reducing ANRs on this RAM bucket. What if your business model isn't focused on installs? If you're monetizing through subscriptions or paid apps, you probably don't see all installs as equal. You'll consider your paying users differently from your non-paying users. And within your paying users, you may even have different tiers of spend. If this rings true for you, you should use the new revenue metrics in Reach and Devices to help you make decisions from a revenue perspective. For instance, in the ANR rate example I just walked through, 30% of my users were on 1.5 to 2 gigs RAM devices. But what if only 5% of my revenue was coming from these devices? Perhaps that's still enough to justify investment. Maybe it's not. If that's the case, then I might want to make a call to change my min spec so that this low quality reach doesn't hurt my overall return on investment. In addition to revenue metrics, Reach and Devices also offers revenue growth metrics for situations where you need to plan ahead. For example, maybe my social app in Brazil is going through a lengthy rewrite and won't be relaunching for 6 months. Then I'd want to understand the growth trends in revenue on these devices for both my app and my peers before making a call. This is an example of how Reach and Devices can help you prioritize, but it can also help you prevent issues. We recently published a case study by FunPlus, who used Reach and Devices when planning a major update to their hit game, State of Survival. The overhaul upgraded some of their game features from 2D to 3D, requiring higher hardware specs to run than before. Reach and Devices helped them tier devices for delivery of their new features, targeting the right devices with the new experience and increasing engineering efficiency. There's one other major launch to call out in this space. You can't talk about technical quality in the abstract. it only has meaning in the context of device specs or models. Reach in Devices gives you a high-level understanding of device specs for decision-making. But when it comes to taking action, like testing or debugging, you have to work with specific devices. That's where the device catalogue comes in. I'm pleased to announce that this has just undergone a complete overhaul, which will make it a lot easier for you to understand and navigate the Android ecosystem at device model level when needed. Let me walk through a few of the improvements. The old catalogue gave you a list of device models in the overview page with SoC and RAM. But SoC may not be the most relevant data point for you. And as many of you know already, a single device model can have many variants. To give you an example of what I mean by a variant, the same device model can come with different Android versions. That's probably obvious to you. Let me give you another scenario that may not be so obvious. Some manufacturers launch the same device model with different chipsets in different countries, or different amounts of RAM. The manufacturer makes the decision to give these devices the same model name, but they have quite significant differences in hardware or software. The key point here is that if a device model has variants, these variants can behave differently. You need to know this to ensure you're picking the right device model to use, and to define your targeting logic correctly. In the existing catalogue, the range of variants wasn't shown. Another limitation is that there was no information to help you prioritise which device models were most important. Following our changes, the overview page now gives you install data for all device models with filtering options so you can immediately see what's important. In addition, you can see at a glance when variants exist because we show you both the RAM and Android version range. And you get finer visibility of targeting status for each device model, including when it's only partially included or excluded because of the variants. We've also added a number of new filters on device attributes like OpenGL extensions and shared libraries. And that's not all. If you do need to go deeper on a specific device model, you can find everything you need in the new details page. This includes dynamic filters if you want to explore variants based on a device attribute that matters to you. Or if you just want to understand what device specs are most representative of this model, you can jump to the list of variants where we label the most common one at the top of the list. We encourage you to check out the improved catalogue today and stay tuned for more changes coming in the future that will make it even more powerful, including better integration with Android Vitals and more customization. Okay, I've talked about new features to help you prioritize, and I've talked about planning and prevention. Now, James will discuss how you fix issues once they've been identified.
Thanks, Lauren. As we've already said, Android Vitals is your comprehensive destination for monitoring quality. We also want it to be as helpful as possible when it comes to fixing quality issues. The first thing I want to talk about is fixing stability issues. There are really two types of instability that can affect an Android app: crashes, where your app unexpectedly terminates because of an error, and ANRs, where your app hangs and isn't responding to input. Here's the crashes and ANRs overview in Android Vitals. You can see that it's designed to show you all the stability issues you're facing with your app that are affecting your crash and ANR rates, sorted by prevalence. How many users are being affected by this issue? This helps you prioritize and identify the most serious issues for urgent attention. When you want to dig into a particular issue, you can click to open up the details page. You can see here the details for one of the crashes we saw on the overview page. If you're a long-time user of Vitals, you might notice that the labeling of issues has changed on this page. As Dave mentioned, we're unifying our clustering and labeling with Crashlytics to make it easier to work across the two products. Now, there are a few different ways you might want to assess the impact of this crash. You can see how often it's occurred. You can see how many unique users it's affected. And you can also see a timeline of the impact of the crash. The timeline helps you establish whether this is a sudden spike, perhaps caused by a server misconfiguration or a bug in a new release, or a relatively flat distribution, maybe resulting from an edge case in your app that's occasionally triggered. The timeline also helps you work out whether this is a bug that's getting worse or that's reducing in impact. One further bit of context that's useful for understanding impact is knowing whether this was a crash that occurred in the foreground when the app was open on the user screen, or in the background, perhaps as part of a syncing operation. So we've added something new here to help with this. The issue visibility breakdown shows you how often the crash occurred in the foreground and how often in the background. It's worth noting here that even if a bug is in a background sync, if that sync can still occur when the app is in the foreground, it'll show up here in the foreground stats. If you scroll down still further, you'll see the stack trace for the crash, which is often the most critical piece of information you need for debugging because it pinpoints the exact place in your code where the crash occurred. You might have noticed that stack traces in Android Vitals have the exception message redacted. We're often asked why this is and whether we can do anything to help, because we recognize that the exception message is sometimes very important as a debugging tool. The reason it's absent in Vitals is that our number one priority is to protect user privacy. Exception messages can contain free text, so they might contain credit card numbers, geolocation, or other personally identifiable information. But we've been working on a plan to address this so that you can get the debugging information you need while still preserving user privacy. Soon, we're going to start showing exception messages in Vitals, but still ensuring that user data stays private. In order to do this, we'll be redacting anything in the message that looks like it might be unique to the user, so credit card details, for instance, will still be removed. That's good for users because it protects their privacy, and it's good for you because it enables us to show you what you need in order to debug your crash. If you want to make sure your exception messages will show up in Vitals, you can simply make sure that you don't include anything in your exception messages that will be likely to vary widely from user to user. Now that we've shown you some of the tools available to help you improve the quality of your app, let's see how some app developers have been able to use these tools in practice. The first app to highlight is OK Credit, which is a credit account management app for small businesses. The OK Credit developers used Android Vitals to discover that they were having problems with both ANRs and startup times. The combination of the two led them to investigate whether the two issues were linked, and by digging into the stack traces of some of the ANRs in Android Vitals, they found that they had a number of places where startup code was running on the main thread and performing operations that could be delayed or run in the background. Some of this was in their own code, and some was down to initializing third-party libraries. When they moved some of this work to run asynchronously and lazily initialized some of the objects the app needed, it had a significant effect on both their ANR rate, which improved by around 50%, and their startup time, which went down by 70%. And this had a knock-on effect of an increase of 12% in their conversion rate between app startup and recording a transaction. That is a big return on their investment. And on low-end devices, they also improved their day one customer retention by about 25%, and the average transaction for each merchant increased by 30%. Secondly, let me tell you about Swiggy, a food delivery service in India. The developers at Swiggy could see in Android Vitals that they had problems with Jank. Sometimes the UI would freeze. Jank is a concern because it can create a negative experience for users and make retention harder. The team investigated the Jank problems using Perfetto, a tool available in Android Studio, and improved the Jank markedly. And not only did they see an improvement in Vitals, but their business metrics saw an uptick too. Their bounce rate decreased by around 28%. They attracted an additional 33,000 orders per month, bringing extra revenue of 11 million rupees per month. And average engagement time per session increased by about 30%. So you can see that improving your Vitals really can have a major impact on your engagement and your revenue. Another good example of developers using Android Vitals to identify opportunities is Lyft. They used Android Vitals to look at their startup times and compared with their peers using Play Console's peer benchmarks, and saw that their driver app started 15 to 20% slower than their peers. For drivers that have a choice of which driver app they could use, that could make a significant difference. They investigated the problem and established that with one engineer month of work, they could make large improvements to their startup times. And this, together with the Vitals data, gave them the information they needed to make a business case to their leadership for the investment. And with that one engineer month, they were able to decrease startup time by 21%. And it wasn't just their Vitals metrics that improved. Critically, this led to an increase in driver sessions by 5%. Hopefully, these case studies have given you an insight into the effectiveness of Android Vitals for improving your own app's metrics. I'll hand back to Dave now to wrap up.
Thanks, James. As you can see from the Lyft story and the others in this talk, your peers are using Play's quality tools to make meaningful improvements to their user experience, and they're seeing significant business impact from doing so. We hope that these examples are inspiring, instructive, and have started you thinking about some things you can do with your own app. One more thing to inspire you. While we're very proud of all the launches we're announcing today, we aren't stopping there. We know there's still more to do, and you'll see us continuing to launch new features over the coming months. These launches have one of three major themes. Firstly, awareness of Vitals metrics. Being able to easily see key Vitals information about performance and stability can ensure you are aware of issues and opportunities to improve your user experience. Now you can access Android Vitals through our new API and console, and we'll continue to extend the Vitals touchpoints over time. Next, measuring what matters most to users. We are working on metrics for new aspects of quality not previously available in Vitals, so that you can understand and improve user experience still further. Finally, making it easier to troubleshoot and fix. We're investing heavily to increase the context about the user issues that we report in Vitals through powerful filters, metadata, and unique information gathered from across the Android ecosystem. All right, we've made it to the end. That's a lot of information. Let me recap what we've covered. We started the talk explaining why quality matters. We introduced the ideas of quality reach and explained why it's not enough for your app to have good quality reach. It also needs to minimize low quality reach. Then we walked through the tools and new features to help you deliver a great user experience, and talked about some of your peers who are using these tools to do exactly that and seeing significant business impact from doing so. To wrap up, I'd like to leave you with some easy ways to take advantage of the existing quality features and the new ones we've told you about today. For monitoring, keep an eye on your Android Vitals metrics. The scores, are they going up? Are they going down? Remember, Vitals shows the same quality data that the store uses, so even if you use another crash monitoring system, it's good to also check in with Vitals every week or two. With the new and soon expanding connection to Crashlytics and the API, we are making it easier to do just that. For evaluation and prioritization, look at your bad behavior threshold and peer benchmarks, and keep an eye on the ecosystem of devices using your app, using Reach and Devices. It's an easy way to compare how your app performs relative to your competitors and can help make the case for an investment in quality with meaningful results, as you saw with the Lyft case study. You can use the new capabilities of the device catalog to manage variants and help you make the right targeting decisions to ensure you maximize high quality reach and minimize low quality reach. For optimizing and fix, take advantage of the filters and breakdowns offered to get you to the root cause of your issue or help prioritize. The new foreground-background information can help you focus on the most user-impacting issues, and the new country filters can help global apps understand the difference in experience across geographies. Finally, if you're a game developer, use Android Performance Tuner to get better monitoring of your frame rate and startup time, and find where you can make optimizations to improve your user experience. Do take a moment to think about this list and whether there's one new thing you can try yourself or something to take back to your team. It's been a pleasure telling you about all the things that are new and exciting in the world of play quality. I hope the stories of other developers taking advantage of these tools are exciting and motivating, and that you can put the tools we've released to good use. We are always amazed to see what you, our developer community, can create, and are excited to continue our journey together. On behalf of Lauren and James, as well as myself, thanks.